is a Tracking the Tropics update with the certified most accurate weather team at First Coast News.
Well, hello everybody. Morning to you. I am meteorologist Lewis Turner here at First Coast News, and the focus now on Hurricane Milton. Milton, there it is. Kind of see, if you look in that top sort of right quadrant, this is what this is. This is an infrared satellite picture. So this isn't radar. All right, radar shows us rain, of course, and that's from ground reading sites generally, though the hurricane hunters can put radar in as well. But generally speaking, we're getting rain returns from radar sites on the ground. Satellites coming up from space, and they use infrared imagery. And where you see the deepest, darkest reds, those are cloud tops up high in the atmosphere, colder cloud tops, and that shows us convection, shows us thunderstorm activity around the center. And when I say look at that top right quadrant of this storm, you can see the eye wall getting developed on a storm that is extremely strong. So forgive me, as I look off screen, I'm just kind of reading these specific numbers right now. 125 mile an hour wind, so that makes it a Category 3 storm on the Saffir-Simpson scale. You see right there moving east-southeast at 8. East-southeast, as you look at the eye wall's general motion, you can see that's almost like it's towards Cancun, where there are hurricane warnings right now. That would be for Mexico. This thing is going to make a turn. All right, so we know the turn is coming. It's going to be up and more towards that northeast very soon, later on in the day, but this thing has some strengthening to do as well. So you want to see the cone. There's your cone. There is the current track, actually strengthening maybe even later on today, maybe even later on in the next couple of hours. So we get an 8 o'clock update. Next big update that's going to take all the computer modeling in. So the early morning computer model runs and overnight runs, and it's going to be plugged in from the National Hurricane Center into this forecast cone, and we could get a wiggle, maybe to the north, maybe to the south. But one thing is certain, it seems like this will be strengthening to a Category 4 storm as we get maybe here in the next few hours, maybe even by the 11 o'clock update from the Hurricane Center. This is going to be a really, really strong storm. Will it maintain force strength as it gets to land? Well, Hurricane Center thinks it'll be a 3, but still nonetheless a major hurricane. I have this cone right now. I want you to ask your questions, though. Feel free, fire away. I got my diligent crew just off camera here. I got my guy Andy, I got my guy Malcolm, and they're going to be firing off your questions. You'll hear them chiming in as well. And maybe, you know what, honestly, maybe Andy and Malcolm have questions. I'd love to field theirs, and we can get specific. We can get nitty gritty. You can do big picture stuff. You can do little. Do you want to know what the weather is going to be like in St. Augustine? Cool. We'll talk about that, because frankly, St. Augustine is going to have some pretty big impacts, at least with current track. Now, we say all this. Look at that cone, and the cone is pretty wide, right? So specifically talking at landfall. So we're talking about a potential landfall. And remember, with the cone, all it's talking about is the eye wall. It's not talking about the outer bands. It's not talking about the outer edges of the impacts, which will be felt. But it's talking just where landfall from the center of the eye wall is going to take place. And from that cone and Hurricane Center forecasting, very likely it could happen anywhere from Cedar Key up closer to the northern side of the Gulf Coast, all the way down to Naples, Fort Myers, south of there. So there's a lot of wiggle still that's going to be happening within this forecast cone. A further south track, better for us as far as the First Coast in southeast Georgia in local impacts. A little bit further north on the track, and then we're talking about more serious impacts for the First Coast in southeast Georgia. Either way, a major landfalling hurricane in the Tampa Bay area or just a little bit north, we're talking catastrophic and devastating storm surge there. What the cone takes into account, all of these computer modeling, these spaghetti model plots, so you can see how we're dealing with varied results here from as far north as Cedar Key, as far southbound towards that Fort Miles and even Naples area. And what the National Hurricane Center does is take their human knowledge and forecasting abilities, and they've made that centerline path towards Tampa. So we're going to put the European model and the GFS, two popular models that you hear meteorologists online and on television talk about a good bit. GFS, Euro. So Euro's in green, and the tight concentric circles, that's isobars of pressure. Those are your lines of equal pressure. The tighter they are, there is a steeper pressure gradient, meaning pressure goes from high to very, very low in the center in a short amount of time. And that's what causes strong winds, a sharp and steep difference in air pressure. We call that the pressure gradient. The tighter those lines get, those concentric circles, the stronger the storm. And both of those are pretty consistent in intensity. What's different between the Euro and the GFS here, and that what the forecast cone takes into account, you see the Euro in green, a little bit further south of a track, and a little bit faster. The GFS in purple or blue. What is it on your screen? Is it purple? Is it blue? Is it purple, Andy? Thank you. The purple towards a little bit further north of Tampa, that would be a pretty large storm surge situation for Tampa Bay, and that area. It'd be stronger impacts for us as well, the GFS, as it would move a little bit further north of the I-4 corridor. So we've got a north I-4 corridor and a south I-4 corridor potential here with this system. This is your Euro when we're factoring in rain now. So those other, the model comparison I just showed you was just pressure. We're going to put the rainfall rates in, and we're looking at Wednesday afternoon into the evening when we'll start to see those first real impacts, those first feeder bands coming in with the rain and the strong wind gusts. This would be for St. Johns County moving into Duval. This would be those evening hours with a landfalling storm south of Tampa, at least according to this piece of information that we use in the toolbox. That would be Wednesday late afternoon into the evening. Now, what's similar, I don't like comparing hurricanes when we're talking about Milton and Helene. What is similar, though, is timing of it being overnight. You know, with Helene, we dealt with a lot of overnight impacts, and it seems like with Milton, we'll be doing the same thing while a lot of folks are sleeping, at least with the current data. If it slows down, it speeds up, that changes. But with current data, this looks like an overnight scenario as we get into Thursday afternoon into Friday, and then some rapid clearing. That's another thing in common, the quick forward speed with this once it does hit land. Here is your GFS model I showed you, a little tighter with the concentric circles, lines closer together, stronger winds, stronger storm according to GFS, and a little bit further north. So this would mean some really big storm surge for Tampa, bigger than what the Euro would project. And look at those impacts here locally. This particular run means we need to be prepared for a larger surge in Duval and even up into Glenn County, Georgia, and then the power outages as well. And those are just two potential runs. And that's why we kind of take your average of that and think about maybe somewhere splitting the difference. When it comes to sustained winds, current look right now, 40 and up for our counties, central St. John's all the way up to Glenn, and really focusing on our coast, but this includes Putnam County as well. We could get 60 sustained, so we're pushing hurricane force sustained winds in southern St. John's, all of Flagler, and Putnam County through Palatka, and then we get south towards Volusia County, and they're talking about hurricane force sustained winds. Now, as far as our gusts are concerned, tropical storm force gusts will be felt from Duval County, south, perhaps even Nassau County as well. We're going to get those strong winds, and that equals power outages. We're talking hurricane force gusts, anything south of St. Augustine included, and south when we're talking about 70 mile an hour and up wind gusts there, and that would be Putnam County as well. This would be inland counties impacted by this certainly as well. This graphic is ripped straight from the pages of the National Hurricane Center, and if you want to get super granular and you kind of look, they draw out these squiggly lines as the arrival times of your tropical storm force winds. So looking at Wednesday morning, that arrival is for the Tampa area. By Wednesday evening, you see Wednesday 8 o'clock, you're starting to see some of those tropical storm force winds arrive around the counties of the First Coast, and then later on as we get into the evening hours. So let's go county by county then. I know that's a very popular thing to kind of look at, and one of the most important things is what you can expect where you live, obviously. The timing on all of these county by county forecasts is going to be about the same. We're talking Wednesday late, overnight into Thursday morning. That's going to be the worst of it. Your impacts in Putnam County, 60 mile an hour and up, sustained winds. Gusts over 75. All right, rainfall 6 to 12 inches. This is hurricane-like conditions with the current track in Putnam County. So in Palatka, the surrounding areas, this is a stay indoors situation, but it's also something you need to keep in mind. Mobile homes may not be a safe place to be, considering the likelihood of trees coming down and the strength of those winds. St. Johns County, So it impacts 4 to 6 foot storm surge along the beaches and along downtown St. Augustine, right? So the inlets will be have already had a lot of water pushing in with the nor'easter we've had. So think about more water on top of that. Could get gust 75. This is a stay off the road, stay out of the street scenario there, and stay indoors as much as possible. Duval and Clay, 2 to 4 foot surge, and in Duval, St. Johns County, think the San Marco area, the Riverside area, the places susceptible to getting that street flooding. Knight Drive, all the spots that we see it along the creeks, along the tributaries, Hogan, McCoy, all of those likely to get some of that flooding happening, which could actually put water into homes and businesses, especially if it were on the top end of that 4 foot surge. Rainfall 4 to 8 inches, gust 60 plus there, so prepare for the potential for flooding. Nassau, Glenn, Camden County, 1 to 2 foot surge at this current track. Rainfall 2 to 6, gusts 55 and up. What you need to know, prepare for power outages. And I'm going to say the same thing for Columbia, Baker, Bradford, Union counties, as well as inland southeast Georgia, where the impacts won't be as strong with current forecasting. However, the power outage risk is there. So this is all counties included in this county by county look. Everybody needs to have the batteries, everybody, and know what size batteries for your lanterns, your flashlights, any sort of headlamps you may have. I want all manner of light, because remember, this is overnight. You lose power, you're going to be fumbling over things, and the phone may die, so have ways to have that charged with notifications turned on, for heaven's sakes. That way, if a tornado warning were to pop or any other alert, we'll get it directly to you. So that's kind of my big summation of everything. I want to kind of put the 7-day forecast. A lot of folks kind of can wrap their mind around the work week as a whole. For Monday, Tuesday, we're getting the showers not Milton related, right? So this is nor'easter related, which is putting a lot of water into the rivers, putting a lot more water in the ditches and the retention ponds. Something to keep in mind. The pools, for heaven's sake, you might need to even drain your pool as we get into Wednesday and Thursday. Those are your main weather impact days for our weather impact alerts. Wednesday, specifically honing in on late afternoon, overnight Wednesday into Thursday. So there you go. There you have it. Andy, Malcolm, any questions? Anybody have anything they want to fire off to their old Uncle Lou Turner?
So when you started, you said, hey, even if you want to know how it is in St. Augustine, ask. Well,
Yeah.
someone said, St. Augustine, yes, please.
Oh, really?
Even though I know you just went county.
No, let's do it. I want to go, I'll zoom specifically. I went back to Putnam. Let's zoom right in to St. Johns County. And we can get as granular as you want, but think about, like, not comparing storm to storm, but think of storms past in St. Augustine. Think about Ian and Nicole. Think about the water that put into the Avenida de Menendez, Cathedral Place. They're right at the foot of the Bridge of Lines, and then Davis Shores, right? So with that 4 to 6 foot surge, if we're getting up to that top end with gusts at 75 plus, you're going to have water, and those gusts be coming out of the northeast. These aren't the kind of winds that we saw from Helene, where they were coming gusty and strong, but they were coming out of the south, and they were coming out of the southwest. So that general motion pushes water out of the rivers. With the northeast motion that we're going to get being on this side of the storm, I think our tornado risk is down, but our surge risk goes up. So that's going to potentially put some water on the street there in St. Augustine, and could have that flooding that would put water into businesses. So that's my St. Augustine look. Oh, and listen, you can count on a sailboat or two breaking off from their moorings. That always seems to happen. A sailboat's going to come off their moorings in the intercoastal waterway, and so we're going to need to be careful about that. Anybody else fire anything off, my fellas?
I have a flight, but not me, but
Okay.
I have a flight out of Jacksonville at 12:15 p.m. Wednesday. Should I be rebooking?
I hesitate with the airline stuff, because depending on which airline it is, I know some are more apt to cancel on you than others. 12:15 is kind of that leading edge of actually being in the go zone. 12:15, I think you got the green light. I think we're going, but it is never a bad idea to call the nice folks, hit 0 as many times as possible so you can actually talk to an agent and not a robot. But 12:15, with current timing, and of course updates can happen, you should be able to fly out of Jacksonville. But you're pushing it when you get towards 4, 5, 6 o'clock. Good question, I like that.
So in Waycross, they're still picking up from Helene.
Right.
And a lot are still without power.
Yes. Brutal.
Exactly.
Yeah, so it's at least, and let's zoom over to, I like that. Let's zoom over to Waycross. So Nassau, Glen, Camden, we got Columbia, Baker, Bradford, Union, and here is inland Southeast Georgia. So Ware, Charlton, Brantley, Pierce. So Ware, of course, is Waycross, and then Pierce County would be Blackshear, where obviously dealing with a lot of folks still without power, trees down. So the good thing with all of these impacts is rainfall an inch perhaps, because the difference with Milton and Helene, as we compare and contrast, at this point Milton is a much tighter, much more compact storm. So all the rainfall that built up and combined essentially with a frontal system in an area of low pressure in the upper atmosphere with Helene that caused all the devastation to the north. What I'm seeing with Milton, at least so far, is that's not exactly going to be the story. This is a tight, compact storm, very, very strong, with the worst of it closest to its center. So the further you get out of the way with the current track, and remember, Ware, Pierce, Brantley, Charlton, the further south this is, the better it is going to be for you. But with gusts to 35, if you got your power back, there is possibility that you're going to lose power again briefly. So have the batteries, have the ways to get your devices charged and ready to go. But I do think of all of the areas, you should have the fewest of those major impacts.
So someone on YouTube asked,
yes.
What are the watches and warnings? I don't know if any are in place right
now.
now.
Okay, good question. So what?
Storm and like hurricane warnings.
Yeah, okay, so our watches and warnings right now, I don't have my watch and warning map up because locally there's nothing yet. And when I say locally, wherever you're watching from with YouTube, of course we're Duval County centric, but the first coast of Florida and Southeast Georgia. For our friends though in the Tampa area, I'm going to go all the way back to my forecast cone. If you'll just bear with me, I use my old clicker here that's got to go through about 7 walls at First Coast News to get to my computer, but remote control stuff is just glorious. The hurricane watches are in place right now for everywhere that is on the Gulf Coast within that cone. So remember, a hurricane watch, so that means from Fort Myers to Cedar Key. So in the watch means that hurricane conditions are going to be felt within 48 hours. So that we know that. So somewhere, and the watch is everywhere within that cone on the Gulf Coast of Florida. Nothing yet on the East Coast that we've seen. Now, hurricane warnings, and that'll apply to tropical storm warnings as well. Just note that warning means within 36 hours, that's when we're going to start feeling the either hurricane strength or tropical storm force strength, depending on what kind of warning we've got. But right now, watches, warnings issued for the west coast of Florida. I anticipate, I'm just doing the math roughly in my head. It's Monday. We're going to start feeling those impacts here locally Wednesday evening. So I bet by Monday, late afternoon, evening, we'll start to get the first coast version of the watches issued because we'll be about 48 hours out. Good question.
I know you spoke on flights already, but this guy has a flight Thursday morning scheduled to go to London for the Jags game.
Well, so leaving Jacksonville, connecting up to maybe down Miami and over, or if you're doing the LaGuardia or Newark thing over Thursday morning. Don't love it. I'm gonna be honest, don't love it. I'd go ahead and get on the horn with your agent and let's get you Thursday afternoon. Let's get you bumped up to first class. Let's get business class at least.
How was Shot's playing? Get him on Shot Con.
Absolutely. Got to think about what the boys are going to be doing as far as travel too. You got to think about when are they going to head. They need to go ahead and get there now, so they're not worried about anything. Make sure the houses are boarded up and everything, and get over there as soon as possible. But as far as our local trips, that's a great question. People are trying to get to London. Try to do it later Thursday because Thursday morning is going to be a little iffy. The worst of our stuff is out of here Thursday by noon, but it might be a little bouncy come Thursday morning.
And I'll leave you with this one.
Leave us with this.
Should Jacksonville be worried since we are on the left side of the storm, which doesn't happen often?
Okay, good question. So the left side of the storm, I like this graphic for it. And by the way, you're hearing the voice of Andy and Malcolm as well a little bit earlier there. So thanks guys for the questions. Closing with this. Being on the left side of the storm is especially interesting for us. It's not, okay, so we talk about the right side of the storm being the dirty side. The right side of the storm is where you get the potential for tornado spin-ups. with this particular orientation being on the left side of the system, remember everything flows counterclockwise around areas of low pressure, which is what a hurricane is. A hurricane is just a tight, strong area of low pressure, right? So you get the counterclockwise flow. Being on the left side means we're getting the northeast winds, which means we're getting the onshore flow pushing that water, so the potential for surge. A much different kind of surge than what you get with the onshore direct landfalling hit that you would get, say for instance in Tampa. Being on the front right side, so that front right quadrant, the worst possible side to be on a direct landfalling system. With this being on this left side, with this northeast, that's what brings in the greater potential as opposed to what we saw with Helene of actually seeing the surge. And that's got us kind of thinking about that downtown Jacksonville. When you get upwards of 4 feet, you're talking about flooding up into San Marco, up into the communities along McCoy's, Hogan Creek, and that means water potentially up into businesses and up into homes as well. So yeah, you're right. This harkens back a little, not exactly. So I hesitate to make direct comparisons, but just for the sake of the fact that, I mean, if you're Googling Hurricane Charlie, for instance, back in 2004, you would note that there was a path that took a storm essentially right up the gut here, right over Interstate 4. And Charlie, while it took a little bit more northern path, we felt the impacts being on that left side. So, some things to draw references from, but if modeling takes this again a little bit further south because of how tight this storm is and how small it is relative to Helene, maybe the impacts wouldn't be as bad for us, again, the further south. I don't hopecast. I don't have that luxury. But if you're hoping at home and rooting for a specific scenario, you don't want anyone to get the worst of this. But for the First Coast, a further south track is going to be better for them, and a further, just a little bit tick of a further south, it would be a little bit better for Tampa and that surrounding area as well. I think one way or the other, they're going to get a very, very big surge. But if they catch that northeastern quadrant, that front right, it's going to be absolutely devastating. So things to watch, thoughts and prayers, of course, with anybody and everybody in the path of this one, because it's going to be big and strong, a major storm. And this is the type of stuff when we talk about movie level storms, this is that. So anyway, unless my friends have any other questions for me? No? All right, for Andy, for Malcolm, for the entire web department, the entire meteorological team, man, I almost nailed the landing. I'm Lewis Turner. Y'all have a great day. We'll be back a little bit later.
Let's
yesterday
listen.
morning said this is a tropical storm, might become a hurricane yesterday, but probably by today, and it became a hurricane very quickly. And so not only is it a hurricane, it's already a major hurricane, and it's now a Category 4 hurricane with maximum sustained winds at 150 miles per hour. It is expected to make landfall on the west coast of Florida sometime between Wednesday evening or perhaps even very early on Thursday. This has gone slower than the projections were in terms of the how it's moving towards Florida. And if that continues, it's going to push back when landfall will happen. Of course, you can see impacts prior to the eye wall making landfall. We have made a pre-landfall declaration request to FEMA for support, and Kevin has been working with the administrator, and we anticipate positive approval on that. We have 51 counties in Florida currently under a state of emergency. The executive order that I signed over the weekend also orders all disaster debris management sites and landfills to be open 24/7 in the lead up to Hurricane Milton. We had a lot of debris left from Hurricane Helene on Florida's Gulf Coast. That creates a huge hazard if you have a major hurricane hit in that area this week. So we've marshaled state assets to be able to help with that mission, and we're going to continue to do that until it's safe, until it's no longer safe to do so. So we do have a Category 4 hurricane. It is currently located 745 miles southwest of Tampa. It has not moved terribly quickly, but that obviously could change going forward. Storm surge watch has been issued for the Florida Gulf Coast from mainland Monroe County northward to the Suwannee River, the Dixie-Levy County line. 8 to 12 feet peak storm surge is potential for northern Pinellas all the way down to Charlotte, including in Tampa Bay. 5 to 10 feet peak storm surge is possible from Yankeetown southward to the Pasco-Pinellas County line and from Inglewood southward to Bonita Beach, including Charlotte Harbor. Hurricane watches have been issued for portions of west central Florida and Florida's Nature Coast. Tropical storm watches extend further south and north through southwest Florida and the Keys and along portions of the Florida Panhandle. Division of Emergency Management is busy facilitating hundreds of resource requests from communities as we prepare for the impacts. We've already sent major truckloads of food and water to Central Florida in preparation for points of distribution sites after the storm. We're also coordinating the deployment of more than 2,000 feet of flood protection systems and prioritizing critical infrastructure like hospitals, wastewater treatment facilities, and electrical infrastructure. We've deployed a flood barrier around a water pumping station in Bradenton, a fire station in Hillsborough, and more en route to the courthouse in Charlotte County, hospital in Kissimmee, master pump station in St. Pete, and a community resource center in Hernando County. We've also deployed generators to support special needs sheltering operations. And of course, Starlink Internet. All counties have access to that, and we're deploying more as needed. More than 200 ambulances and more than 30 paratransits are in Central Florida footprint, ready to support first responder operations. And as I previously noted, we've ramped up our support of debris removal. That's a 24/7 round-the-clock mission. The state of Florida is amassing significant amount of fuel reserves ahead of Milton, and we're staging it to be utilized as needed. These quantities include 415,000 gallons of diesel, 389,000 gallons of gasoline, and an additional 1.5 million gallons of both diesel and gasoline are currently en route. I know there's different things that are being said, but all fuel continues to arrive at Florida ports. There has not been an interruption of that. I know people are going to fill up their gas tanks, which is a good thing. There's more lines than maybe that we're used to on some of these, but there has not been an interruption in fuel deliveries, and all the ports are checked in on that. Local officials and their vendors must continue debris removal efforts for those areas that are in the potential path of this storm. My executive order requires debris landfill and dump sites to remain open 24/7 to accept debris from Hurricane Helene. We need as much of this debris picked up as possible. This creates a safety hazard, and it also will increase the damage that Milton could do with flying debris. All local entities should comply with this order and work around the clock to accomplish this mission. We have deployed major assets to help, but yet, last night in Pinellas County, there were 300 vehicles. Some of them were state vehicles, but also a lot of private pickup trucks and vehicles who were bringing debris. That's helpful. They should be doing that, and yet one of the gates was locked. There was no one manning it. And so we had this massive line of cars waiting to drop off debris, which is a good thing. And so Florida Highway Patrol basically took matters into their own hands, fastened some rope to a couple pickup trucks to the gate and busted the gate open. And then those trucks were able to go in and unload the debris. We don't have time for bureaucracy and red tape. We have to get the job done. And the effort that Jared Perdue and Kevin's team have made in helping get the debris off and supplementing the local efforts has been incredible. We have noticed since the weekend and the order, you have seen some more vendors out there. I know City of St. Petersburg has been working hard to get the debris out, and that's a great thing. And they're working, I think, well. But these debris sites need to be open, and we're going to ensure that to be able to do. So just in the last 24 hours, the state has done almost 500 truckloads of debris, totaling 9,000 cubic yards. So that's just from the barrier islands in Pinellas County bringing to the debris landfills. We have over 200 state assets, dump trucks, other types of trucks and vehicles to be able to do. But keeping it 24/7 is important. We absolutely encourage private citizens to have the debris and bring it in. That's helping the mission. Can't get bogged down in bureaucracy on this. The debris mission is going to continue until it's no longer safe to do so. Clearly, we're going to be able to work all the way through today and probably all the way through tomorrow, given that the storm's likely not to make landfall till later on Wednesday, and that could even get pushed back even further. So we've made a big dent in this. I know folks on the ground locally and those barrier islands and places like Manatee and Pinellas have been working very hard. But let's get this done. Let's get as much of that debris removed as humanly possible, and let's work 24/7 to be able to do it. So we have right now, just in the debris mission, we have 800 National Guardsmen that are also deployed helping our state agencies. We currently have 5,000 Guardsmen that are mobilized for the response to this storm, and we have more than 3,000 additional Guardsmen who will be mobilized prior to landfall. The National Guard's also deploying heavy equipment to assist with debris removal, including Army and Air Force horizontal construction units, tactical high water vehicles, dump trucks, and front-end loaders. Linemen and power restoration resources are being marshaled in advance of the storm. This is a storm, the path of this storm that would hit the western part of the Florida Peninsula, then go all the way across the peninsula and exit in the Atlantic Ocean. That's going to impact a lot of different utilities. We've spoken to most of them, and they're working to get people here. If you look, we had Helene, and there were 2.4 million restorations, but 99.9% were back within a few days. There's still hundreds of thousands of people without power in some of these other states that got hit by Helene. So there are crews working there, but they're bringing people in from far and wide to be able to respond accordingly. This path of this storm, we don't know exactly how it's going to go. I know they say the eye is going to go here or here. That can move. When you're talking about 30, 40, 50 miles north or south, will make a huge difference in terms of who gets the worst surge, how much power is ended up taken out. And so we have no way of knowing how that's going to shake out. So the resources are being brought in, and the power restoration effort will begin as soon as it's safe to do so. Again, I made this point yesterday, but all of our assets that we had lent to assist in North Carolina are here in the state of Florida. We have a temporary base camp at Tropicana Field to support not just the debris operations, but any post-landfall first responding operations. So we have landfall is going to happen probably sometime later Wednesday, maybe early Thursday, and it could potentially speed up, and so maybe it'll be a little earlier than that. It could continue slowing. Maybe it'll be a little less, but there is going to be a landfall in the middle of this week. Monday morning, where we are today, you have time to execute your plan, but you got to do it now. There have been some evacuations that have been issued. There's going to be a flurry of them today. I know the counties are working on opening shelters. They typically will open the shelters after they have the evacuation go out, not before. So make sure that you're following the news coming out of your local county. But all these barrier islands, all these areas that would be susceptible to this storm surge that's up and down the west coast of Florida, you should assume that there's going to be some form of evacuations that are going to be issued by your local county officials. That is going to happen when you have the potential for storm surge of this magnitude. We also have a storm that's already very powerful. Now, the forecasts are that it's going to peak before it reaches landfall and then weaken. It's still going to be a strong storm, but we don't know that that's necessarily going to happen. And so this is something that's going to be really, really significant one way or another. But you have time to be able to do this today. And again, you don't have to evacuate hundreds of miles. If you're in those barrier islands, if you're in areas that are susceptible to storm surge, you go to areas that are not susceptible to that. Every county has places within them where you can go to. Maybe it's a friend's house, maybe it's a hotel, maybe it's a shelter. We have the ability to withstand wind in Florida with most of our buildings, and nothing would be designated as a shelter if it couldn't withstand that. So that's an option, especially if you're not comfortable getting on the road and traveling a great distance. You don't have to do that. And you're going to see shelters open in all these counties. Kevin is working on supplementing that from the state if there's a need to have more, particularly in Central Florida. So we'll do that. But you have an opportunity today to do what you need to do to execute this plan. You have time today, but do it. But time is going to start running out very, very soon. We are effective at 10:30 a.m. We are suspending all tolls in western part of Central Florida into Central Florida as well as Alligator Alley. People sometimes will say, where do you evacuate to? They just want to get out. They don't want to just stay local, and they want to get out. Well, I think that probably the easiest route would probably be to go north if you're in Central Florida, because the way the storm looks, it looks like it's going to have more of an impact on Central and Southern Florida. Most of these places in Tallahassee and Northern Florida likely aren't going to see as significant of impacts, but be that as it may, just understand that if they have a storm going into the greater Tampa Bay area now, it is possible that that could shift further south. So if you do evacuate south, you may be ending up going to where you're going to have a lot of the storm anyways. We saw that with Hurricane Ian, so just be mindful of that. But again, you don't have to go hundreds of miles. That is not required. Any place that's going to be open as a shelter, Florida hotels that are built within the last however many 20, 30 years are all going to be able to withstand hurricane force winds. Sandbag locations are open in multiple counties in South and Central Florida. Check your county's EM page to find out where those locations are. You can find your county's emergency management page by going to floridadisaster.org/counties, floridadisaster.org/counties, and you have that local EM page that will tell you about any local evacuation orders that are made. But know your zone, know where you are. The bad thing about having a storm right on top is we have these logistical challenges. The one thing people have with Helene, they know if they got a lot of storm surge with Helene, very well may get even more with this storm. So don't mess with the storm surge and do what you need to do to keep yourself and your family safe. We're going to be continuing to work around the clock here at the Emergency Operations Center. We're doing all the things that we would normally do, but then obviously we have this debris removal mission that we've dived into to be able to help these local communities that have all this. It's going well, but we need to keep doing on that. Okay, Kevin Guthrie will come up and give an update.
Thank you, Governor. Thank you for once again supporting the division, the State Emergency Response Team, as we respond to Hurricane Milton. The State Emergency Response Team continues to work on more than 600 mission requests received from our counties. Residents should begin finalizing your disaster plans, and if your plan calls for you to evacuate, you should do so today. Many of the counties are going to issue their evacuation orders today. Some of them, for example, Pasco County, will start at 10 a.m. this morning. Others will be Pinellas County, I believe, at 2 p.m. this afternoon, and still others will have varying times. You may ask why the varying times. Each county's population is factored into that, so the clearance times is what they will be making those decisions based on. So those evacuation orders will be going out today. I would highly recommend, if anybody has the means to do so, you have the capability of going to a hotel, staying with friends and families, get on the road today, wherever that might be. There's hoteling in Orlando. If you are 100% going to need to be dependent on power and you have the means to do so, you may want to consider a Jacksonville. It's likely that Jacksonville will not experience any type of power outage. So if you've got to be guaranteed power and you have the financial means, you may want to consider something a little bit further away. However, for those that do not, shelters will be opening. We recommend that you start moving towards a shelter. Shelter capacity will be limited. You heard the governor say that we are going to work on supplemental sheltering. We have identified state buildings. We have identified vacant buildings across the entire footprint of Florida that we will be opening up additional shelters when school buildings and other shelters, traditional shelters, start to reach their capacity. Many of you may need to resupply your disaster supply kit. Again, that is a today thing. You need to be doing that today. If you get to a shelter, there will be food and water there. It will not be sit down eating. It will be shelf stable meals. It would be more of the type of material or food that you're used to seeing at a point of distribution, but we will have food and water. If you have access for functional needs and have not registered with the Florida Special Needs Registry, you need to do that this morning. They've already started, cities and counties have already started call downs of their special needs registry to ensure that those individuals have a ride to the closest special needs shelter. If you depend on medication or electricity to use your medical devices, your area is called to evacuate, you need to do so. You may lose power and there will be no way to use your medical devices. Make sure that's a part of your plan. The National Hurricane Center released new storm surge values as of 8 a.m. this morning. They issued a special advisor at 9 that the governor's already talked about, where the hurricane force winds are now Category 4. However, I'm going to draw your attention to something we did for you this morning. Everybody likes visuals. 5 feet and 10 feet. The ceiling in here is 10'8". We're talking about storm surge values higher than the ceiling. Please, if you're in the Tampa Bay area, you need to evacuate. If they have called for your evacuation order, I beg you, I implore you to evacuate. Drowning deaths due to storm surge are 100% preventable if you leave. We had situations where people died of drowning in Hurricane Ian. Had they just gone across the bridge from Estero Bay, Sanibel Island, and so on, just across the bridge to the first available shelter that had capacity, they'd still be alive today. Please remember that counties will call for these evacuation orders, and we will likely be seeing those today, as I've already mentioned. If you need to evacuate, we want you to evacuate out, not up. After I made the comment last night, my brother-in-law called me and said, in fact, for Hurricane Helene, we have 380 elevators that are not working in the greater Tampa Bay area. Elevators are going to go down. You're not going to be able to get down the elevators. If you are dependent on elevator usage versus stairs, you need to make that a part of your evacuation plan. If you cannot get down those stairs, you need to evacuate. Evacuate out, not up. You can visit floridadisaster.org/no to determine if you live in an evacuation zone. Your gas tank and electric vehicle only need to be halfway full. Get the gas, get as much as you need to get to where you're going. If you're in an evacuation zone, you need evacuation assistance, please call this number, 1-800-729-3413. That's 1-800-729-3413. That's for all residents. We have people there to answer your questions, and we can help you get out of your evacuation zone if you need additional assistance. The state has activated the State Assistance Information Line, also known as the SAIL line. If you need information, again, information only on resources. They cannot get you people, but if you need to ask a question, that is what the SAIL line is for. 1-800-342-3557. Again, that's 1-800-342-3557. We have English, Spanish, and Haitian Creole waiting to help you out. Additional preparedness resources can be found at floridadisaster.org/updates. Make sure you follow us on X, Instagram, at FLSERT, and on Facebook at FDEM, as we are sharing updates in real time. Please make sure that you have a way to receive alerts. Make sure that you see all the additional information at your county emergency management agency at floridadisaster.org/counties. And again, thank you, Governor, for your continued support and partnership.
Jared?
All right, thank you, Governor, and good morning. We have continued to respond to Hurricane Helene and also ramp up our efforts to prepare for Hurricane Milton. To date, FDOT has removed nearly 180,000 cubic yards of debris statewide, and as you heard from Governor DeSantis, we've taken the mission of removing as much as debris as possible before Milton makes landfall very serious. We've mobilized every available state asset and resource to do just this. It's been a partnership between FDOT, DEM, Florida Department of Agriculture, the National Guard, and the State Guard. We have a lot of people on the ground. We have a lot of equipment on the ground. We have continued to remove debris. It is really important that everybody understand we're in this thing together. As you heard from the governor, we saw a lot of private property owners bringing debris to landfills throughout the night last night. We highly encourage that. Every little bit of debris that gets removed counts and gets us to our goal and helps us fulfill that mission. We are calling on all of our local governments, local municipalities, and debris vendors and contractors. If you have available resources and available assets, please deploy those. Join us, join state employees and our asset deployment of all of our equipment to remove debris in Pinellas, Manatee specifically, where they were hit hard by Helene. This is a very important mission. We're all in this together. We need everybody to mobilize their resources and assets. As you've heard from the governor, throughout the day yesterday, we moved a lot of debris. We're going to continue working until it's no longer safe to do so. And our goal, again, is to remove as much debris as we can possibly remove before Hurricane Milton makes landfall. As you heard from the governor, we are preparing to suspend tolls effective at 10:30 a.m. this morning for West Florida, Central Florida, and Alligator Alley to help facilitate those evacuations. We have seen people begin to leave already, which is a good thing. You need to leave early. If you're within those low-lying areas where storm surge could impact you, the earlier you leave, the better. It's going to help with traffic, it's going to help with evacuations, and it will make your trip a lot easier. We've seen increased volumes on I-75 and I-4. We're continuing to watch traffic live with our 10 regional traffic management centers across the state. They operate 24/7. We've increased the number and frequency of our Road Ranger Service Patrol and Motorist Aid to facilitate those evacuations. They do have the ability to aid motorists with fuel, water, and also remove stranded or idle vehicles out of the travelway. We've also prepared our shoulders for what we call emergency shoulder use. As volumes pick up and speeds lower for the interstate facilities, we then begin to implement what's known as emergency shoulder use, and we open up the shoulders of our interstates for live traffic. We do that when the speeds get down to around 40 miles per hour. We have a partnership with Florida Highway Patrol, and they go out there, the troopers go out there live, real time, and assist people in getting on the shoulder to help relieve congestion. We've used this.
There you've been listening to Governor Ron DeSantis along with other officials speaking about Hurricane Milton, now a Category 4. And we know that people have questions about the track, the timing. Let's check in with meteorologist Lewis Turner.
Katie, appreciate it. So yeah, Cat 4, and a look at the infrared satellite picture right now, you see a pretty clear eye being defined here, and that's some strengthening that'll happen and continue to happen, though. We don't have much further to go to get to that 5 level, though. Right now, Hurricane Center says it's going to stay right at that Category 4 strength, perhaps even 3 at landfall. A lot can change here, and in fact, if you look at just the variance within this cone of just how far the potential from, say, Cedar Key all the way to Fort Myers or below, even where the landfall can potentially occur. But then this will be a Wednesday, later on in the evening, overnight, Wednesday, Thursday morning event. So while a lot of folks are sleeping, Wednesday night, or would typically be sleeping, is when we would see some of the greatest impacts with this. Hurricane watch is now in effect for the entirety, essentially, of where that cone includes on the west coast of Florida, and we'll continue to see those warnings as we get into 36 hours, and we'll probably see some of those expand into the First Coast area as well. So your county by county forecast, you're looking at Palatka, you're looking at Palm Coast, some of the worst there. Further south you go, you'll see the worst conditions, but you could get a 4 to 6 foot surge in St. Augustine, which would mean water up and into the Avenida de Menendez, the bayfront there. Duval Clay, 2 to 4 foot, which would mean some water in businesses and some homes close to those tributaries, McCoy Creek, Hogan Creek, along the St. Johns River, the Black Creek even. We'll watch that with rainfall 4 to 8 inches, but we could get gusts to 60 plus. And I know that official just mentioned maybe power outages won't be as likely in Jacksonville. What I will say to that is I know exactly what he means relative to what's going to happen on the west coast or central Florida, where they could have power outages for much, much longer. We certainly could see power outages here. In fact, if you think about what happened with Helene, with a lot of us having those outages, it'd be similar conditions to that, though fewer impacts for Ware, Charlton, Brantley, and Pierce County in southeastern Georgia. So in our 7-day, remember, Wednesday, later in the day, overnight into Thursday will be the greatest impacts felt.
This has been a First Coast News on Your Side special report, Tracking Milton, always streaming on First Coast News Plus.
Milton.